President Donald Trump is on the move today, leaving Washington for the first time in his second term. The trip includes stops on both sides of the country as he visits two states recently ravaged by natural disasters. Right now, the president is en route to Los Angeles to tour devastation from the deadly wildfires. This morning, he was in North Carolina, which is still reeling in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. During his stop there, the president announced he will be signing a new executive order to help those who still need relief in the Tar Heel state.
Today, I'll also be signing an executive order slashing all red tape and bureaucratic barriers and permits to ensure the rapid reconstruction of the roads here in western North Carolina. We're going to go through a permitting process that's called no permitting, just get it done.
Let's bring in CBS senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang, who is covering the president's movement. So, Weijia, we mentioned the Trump's movements today, North Carolina, Los Angeles. What did Trump first say in his visit to North Carolina, and how is he being received?
Well, the president has made several stops already, Lindsay, and because this area in North Carolina was heavily supportive of Trump during the election, it's no surprise that he is getting a warm reception. But he already has made some important news, Lindsay. At the top of that list is the fact that he says he wants to dismantle FEMA and could do that altogether. He says that it is a disaster and that it is too bureaucratic because there are too many, too much red tape that states have to go through. So he has suggested eliminating it and essentially giving the money directly to the states themselves. He also made a bit of news because he has said before that he would put conditions on aid to California, and he clarified that he meant he wants there to be voter ID cards in that state and for the state to turn the water on to make sure all the available water is flowing, which the governor has said is already the case. And so he did not say, Lindsay, whether there would be conditions put on the aid in North Carolina. But certainly this is unprecedented that a president would be conditioning aid for political reasons, which is what he has already talked about. In terms of FEMA, he was pressed on a possible timeline for when he would want to try pulling that agency apart, and he wasn't clear about that. But he seemed to be committed to the idea to get rid of that agency.
So you mentioned California. We know that President Trump and California Governor Gavin Newsom have been at odds. They're at odds policy-wise. They've traded some barbs over the last couple of weeks. What can we expect from the president's visit there?
Well, certainly the governor, we expect, will greet the president at the very least when he arrives in California. And then the president is set to have fire briefings on all of the damage and destruction in that area. We don't yet know to what extent that Newsom and Trump will be interacting today. As you mentioned, there is some bad blood there. In fact, President Trump has called on Newsom to resign, he claims, because of what a terrible job he did in handling the wildfires. And so it's certainly going to be tense. But we've also seen him meet with, people he doesn't exactly consider friends in the past. And I guess the bottom line is we don't know until it actually happens.
CBS News has learned the Trump administration has given federal immigration authorities permission to seek out and revoke the legal status of hundreds of thousands of migrants that former President Biden allowed into the U.S. What more can you tell us about this move? Yeah, so our colleague actually obtained a memo from the Department of Homeland Security, Camilo Montoya Galvez, and he is reporting that essentially this has two parts, that the Trump administration's acting director of Homeland Security has two instructions for federal immigration officials to carry out. The one that you mentioned really impacts the bulk of the migrants who could be targeted, the undocumented immigrants who could be targeted because they came into the country under parole with the Biden administration, which means that the government allows them here on humanitarian grounds. And now the Trump administration is rolling that back. And so it gives the immigration officials the authority to go after some 1 million of those migrants. And then in a second part, we expect that they'll be able to detain and try to deport another about 500,000 immigrants
by expediting the process, and typically that is only allowed in places that are about 100 miles from the border, but this is expanding it, allowing it throughout the country. And so we have to see how that is implemented and the effects of actually deporting immigrants. Lindsay?
Weijia, Jiang, thank you.
Sure.
The Senate is set to vote today on the confirmation of Trump's controversial pick for Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth has faced widespread criticism from Democrats over his past, which includes allegations of sexual harassment and assault, financial mismanagement, and drinking on the job. Despite the questions swirling around his pick, President Trump is pressing forward, expressing support for Hegseth.
Look, whatever it is, he's a good man. I don't know what's going to happen. You never know in those things, but Pete's a very, very good man. I hope he makes it. I was very surprised that Collins and Murkowski would do that. And, of course, Mitch is always a no vote, I guess. It's Mitch a no vote? How about Mitch? He what? Let's see what happens.
Let's go ahead and bring in CBS News congressional correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns from Capitol Hill. Caitlin, good to see you. So Hegseth lost 2 centrist Republican votes, Senators Murkowski and Collins. It's my understanding, and math is not my strong suit, he can afford to lose 1 more, and Vice President Vance could still break the tie. If he loses 4 Republicans that join Democrats, he's sunk. Are there any other potential lawmakers you're watching?
Lindsay, you passed the math test.
Ooh.
I know in journalism we don't have a lot of, we never expect that, but here on Capitol Hill we get used to those numbers. But you're exactly right. There are just a few votes that he can afford to lose here. But if you're looking at the vote that happened yesterday to start this whole process, only 2 defected, as you mentioned, Collins or Murkowski. As much as the president says he was surprised, it's really no surprise given their public statements and given how they are, as you mentioned, more moderate Republicans, and they aren't inclined to the Trump base the way that other members are. But it is very unlikely at this point that Hegseth doesn't get confirmed because of what the numbers are. There could be a couple of wild cards. Mitch McConnell, as the president mentioned, also not the Senate leader anymore, also can, have a little freedom there, but that's could be unlikely as well. Bottom line, by tonight, you are likely to see Pete Hegseth confirmed as the next defense secretary. And that is really interesting considering a month ago, he seemed kind of left for dead. His campaign or his nomination was really revived with this pressure campaign that conservative Republicans placed on getting support for him.
So let's talk about somebody who may be on even thinner ice, Tulsi Gabbard. We have reporting that Trump's pick to serve as director of national intelligence may be in danger. What do we know?
That's right. She has been having meetings on Capitol Hill with a variety of different senators, but particularly those on the Committee of Jurisdiction. She's expected to have her confirmation hearing next week. That's been scheduled. But we have reporting from our colleagues at CBS that there is some skepticism even among Republicans about her nomination. Remember, she is a former Democrat. She switched parties and has been a close ally of now President Trump. And there are a lot of Republicans who have invited her into the fold, but there are these questions about past comments, about past behaviors, and about this ability to do the job that have been, placing greater scrutiny. But it's interesting to watch what happens with Hegseth tonight, with what happens with RFK Jr. Next week. He also has his confirmation hearing. It'll be interesting to see what kind of pressure is building on these Republicans, and if the president feels like he needs to get more involved here. He hasn't really been laying the hammer down when it comes to Gabbard. Does that change next week? These are some open questions.
And since taking office, President Trump has, of course, as we know, signed a slew of executive orders. His administration has enacted policies now designed to target illegal immigration. The White House says it's already started using military aircraft to assist with deportation efforts. How are lawmakers on Capitol Hill responding?
Well, mostly along party lines, as you might expect. There is a cheering among Republicans who have been, wanting the president to take swift action, and something that he campaigned on. And so this is being at least funneled through Republican circles as, promises made, promises kept. There remains to be seen what the scope of military involvement is. That is a big question about what the president wants and how this will be administered. There are some things that you can't have the military do. And so that remains an open question as we move ahead. But this, by and large, has been well received by Republicans.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, big congratulations on your new assignment. Our Capitol Hill coverage will be richer for it, and I look forward to many more conversations.